apologies that I appear in darkness. I promise you it is bright where I am. I need to invest in a webcam. But welcome so much to the podcast. And I just want to kick it off by asking you, how would you like yourself to be introduced on the podcast?
How would I like myself to be introduced? My name is Brian
Yes.
Muguto. I am the Chief Strategy and Product Innovation Officer at EssenceMediacom, and also founder of my own mini enterprise called 20 Odd.
And so what does Media Essence Com do exactly? Because that's also quite a mouthful for an organization, Media Essence Com.
Essence Mediacom. It's
Essence
okay.
Mediacom,
It's all good.
sorry.
So, Essence Mediacom is for all intents and purposes a media agency, or a communications agency. Actually, we've been Mediacom for the longest amount of time in South Africa and across the globe, I guess. At the beginning of this year, we relaunched as Essence Mediacom because we merged with another agency called Essence. And that's why we have the really long name, Essence Mediacom. But we do a bunch of stuff. Media strategy, planning, and buying is sort of like at the heart of what we do. But we have a bunch of other services we do, everything from SEO to social and influencer marketing, to econometric modeling and data and analytics and tech dashboards and so on. Everything that sort of like feeds into having a healthy and well functioning communication ecosystem for any sort of brand. Um, yeah, I could talk forever, so you must stop me. We service brands like Coca-Cola, P&G, PlayStation, Adidas. So yeah, Distel. Just
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was about to ask who are some of the cool clients you've worked with.
yeah. So those are some of the bigger names, but I mean, we've got such a spectrum of clients. Locally, we work with Mr. Price, for example. Distel, I'm not sure if we can still call them local because of, they're sort of like partnered or been taken over by Heineken. And then we've got a lot of global brands, some of which I've already mentioned as well. And Google's also one of our clients. So quite a interesting roster of clients. Yeah.
Impressive. So, your role as the head of strategy, media strategy, and product innovation, what is it that you do exactly in that role?
Cool. Well, firstly, there is also a head of strategy. I'm the chief strategy officer. So
Chief strategy, sorry. I'm getting it all mixed up
it's
today.
okay. It's okay. We'll walk through it together. Okay. So so strategy is one of our core functions alongside media planning and buying. And then the product element of my role speaks to all of the other things that I talked about, like the social and influencer marketing, the SEO, and all of those things. We call them disciplines, and we actually have heads of disciplines at our agency. So there is a head of SEO, a head of social and influencer marketing, a head of analytics and insights, a head of data and tech, head of strategy, etc. And then I sort of oversee and work with all of them. And because ultimately what we're trying to deliver is not siloed solutions from each one of those different sort of disciplines, but rather coming up with the best integrated solutions based on what the needs of the clients are. So it may well be that in some cases the client just needs strategy, but in some other cases that strategy might also unlock the conversation around
Mm.
SEO and social media, or influencer marketing. And in the end, our solution may be a combination of all of those things. But at the heart of all of it is the analytics and insights discipline. We strongly believe that everything has to start with data, data to understand the contextual environment that the
Hmm.
business is operating in, data to understand the consumers or the people or cultures and tribes that we're trying to connect with, data to understand the competitors and what they're up to and stuff. So everything starts there. So analytics and insights is arguably one of our most important disciplines, and everything starts with them.
Has that been something that's come up quite a lot recently over the years? Because I mean, data wasn't always such a big piece in a business, and now it seems like it's just exploded
Yeah,
across
100%. I
industries.
mean, data's always been there, right? In different shapes and forms. Um,
Mm,
I think what's happened in recent times is that we've become better at finding it or mining it. We've become better at organizing it,
mm,
understanding it, and we've become better at being able to use that understanding to actually act on it, to generate outcomes for businesses, for brands, for ourselves as people as well. And I think that's the most interesting part, right? I mean, yes, you speak about an explosion of data, and that's 100% right. The amount of content, information, and ultimately data that's generated by people, businesses, companies, everything, every single day, every single minute, every single second is astronomical. So it's put more
mm.
pressure on us to be able to try and find ways of working with it that are better. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why AI has become such a massive thing lately. Any way that we can sort of transfer some of the labor of having to shift and sift and mine through this data and make sense of it, automate that functionality and make our thinking process and how we act on that data a lot easier is obviously something that's going to fly. So yeah.
So you also mentioned that you have a side hustle called 20 Odd Creative Collective. So what is it that you do in your side hustle exactly?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that's not necessarily all clearly defined. Um, from my own passion in photography, um, started off just had a little camera that my dad got me when I was sort of preteen, if I can use that term. And every time we'd go on holiday, I was always taking pictures of the family, pictures of animals when we were on, so game drives and things like that. I was going to say safari, but I was like, no, that's not like African appropriate. But I started taking pictures of people too. So whether it was like at a birthday party or like Christmas or whatever it is, I'd always be taking pictures. And then one day, my aunt actually invited me to a breast cancer survivors function that she had organized. And she asked if I could come take pictures for that, which I did. She loved the pictures and she offered to pay for them. And I was like, no, 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 we're family. It's all good. Don't worry about it. And she was like, no, really, you should really capitalize on this talent of yours. So I took the money and I went and I, and I went and I, you know what
She
I mean?
started your career.
So yeah, I went and I registered 20 odd, and the name 20 odd actually comes from the fact that it isn't actually clearly defined. So it could be like 20 odd projects here or 20 odd activities there. Or, it's just like a loose
Yeah.
way of saying there's a bit going on or a lot going on. And yeah, so photography became the core. So I've got a little bit of a studio where I do portrait photography. I also go and do home visits or on location photography. I can do corporate shoots at companies, whatever it is, right? And I think naturally, because my career is in the creative space and my side hustle, if you like, is also in the creative space, I I bump into a lot of other creative people who are also doing things that are both on the job and outside of the job. Uh, and I
Yeah.
started accumulating names and contacts, LinkedIn, Facebook, all over the place, WhatsApp. So 20 Odd Creative Collective is really just in reference to the collective of people that I have in my sort of wider circle of creatives who do everything from graphic design and web development to user experience design to copywriting to photography, videography. etc. Um, which makes me a good plug. So if you ever need anybody to help with any of your creative needs, I probably know somebody for whatever thing that is that you need to get done.
So obviously you find yourself in two creative positions, where you're working at EssenceMediacom and then obviously running your own creative agency, 20 Odd Creative Collective. What would you say was your amazing, affluent, Oprah Winfrey aha
The word
moment in your
affluent
career?
is tricky. I wish I could go around saying I'm affluent.
Well, what affected you then? What was
You know
affluent to
what?
you?
Yeah. I think I was actually having a conversation with somebody the other day, yesterday, not the other day, yesterday, and they were talking about how we spend all of this time sitting at our desks in the office, and we're in the creative world, and it's like, how
Mm,
can you possibly be, as creative as you possibly can if you are always sort of like stuck there in front of a screen just churning out stuff. And he spoke about how he likes to find outlets, things that allow him to go and stretch his mind and stimulate his mind in different ways, so that when he comes back to what he needs to do,
mm-hmm.
he's got like different stimulus, different things that allow him to think in different ways and different directions. So I think more so than looking at it as like two different jobs, or something like that. Like, I mean, 20 odd is not an agency.
Mm-hmm.
20 odd is just something I do. It's something that I collaborate with people, and it could be just, a small gig on a weekend, or it could be like a whole project and that sort of thing. But I don't see it as work. I just see it as, this is a creative outlet, something
Yeah.
else that I'm doing as an extension of just my creative self, I guess. Um, and it's cool because then when I do get back to my day job, if I can call it that, I have other things to talk about, and other ways that I can add value to the conversation beyond just the sort of linear understanding of our space that most others would have. Um, so it's complementary. It's more complementary than two different things. Um, and like I said, I think obviously how 20 odd happened was not intentional at first, but I think as I've kind of like
Mm,
started to see the value that I can add, and the value that people within the collective or the network can add, and that sort of thing, I've become more and more intentional about it, and more structured about it. So, for example, there's a job board now on Facebook, which is just over 5,000 people, where I started off by just posting jobs that were available at my company. And now there's like, different recruiters, different people from across the creative industry, who every time there's a job in their space will post, and or other people will come and say, well, I'm looking for something, I'm looking for this, here's my CV, here's my profile, here's my portfolio, and that sort of thing. So it's like a job exchange.
mm,
So that's like an intentional outcome of that process, as an example of things. Um, and also like my brother is also in business. He works a lot with small and medium sized enterprises and that sort of thing. Um, their work is around investments, economics, that sort of thing. But a lot of these people that he interacts with need creative services. And in the conversations that we have
mm,
together, there's often times where like I'll be like, oh geez, I know somebody who can do that, or hey, you know what, I can help you out with that. It's also one of those things that adds value, even just informally, to like small businesses, startups, and that sort of thing. Um, which I
mm,
guess then led me to the other intentional space, which was then like seeking out startups and seeing how I can add value in that space as well. So now there's a partnership that I have with guys, two guys who started a startup called Kuronga. And Kuronga is basically a platform that's designed to add value to the agricultural value chain. So connecting farmers who are up and coming to markets. It's a digital platform used anywhere really, but for the purposes of
Okay.
development and testing and that sort of thing. Um, the guys have launched here in South Africa, and they're also trialing in Zimbabwe as well. But as I said, because it's digital, by that nature, it can basically travel to any market or any corner of the
Mm.
world. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting partnership that we have because we've got one guy who is sort of like a crop scientist whose sort of specialism is in developing um, drought resistant crops. The other guy is got a financial services background and investment background, but he recently bought a farm with his wife, and they apply a lot of the methodologies and a lot of the technology on their own farm. So, putting your money where your mouth is type thing. And then I
Okay.
come, yeah, and then I come into the
Yeah.
dynamic in terms of like, well, you guys have got an amazing story to tell. How do we get your story out there? And I consult with them on how they can use platforms like social media or events and
Yeah.
activations to draw people into their world and for them to tell their story and hopefully attract investors for what they're building to grow and multiply.
Is that what you think attracted you to a career in marketing? Is the storytelling
Yeah,
aspect
I
of it?
think I think a lot of my stories and sort of like career redirects are not necessarily all by design. So I studied business management at university. So marketing wasn't necessarily the main thing, but I ended up getting a marketing sort of part time job when I was in my third year of uni, and I just continued with it after I'd graduated. So that's how I happened into marketing. But once I was there, it was wonderful. I think the storytelling aspect of it came later on because at the beginning of my career, I wasn't a strategist,
Okay.
not in the sense that I am now. It was more sort of like pure marketing, doing exhibitions, doing more from a sales support type of thing. I think as a strategist, though, storytelling then definitely became a superpower. It's something that I do enjoy. People often, talk to me about being a wordsmith and that sort of thing. I always feel like that's a heavy burden to carry, but uh, but yeah, I mean, storytelling is something I enjoy. From writing the perfect headline on a slide to crafting an entire narrative for a strategic business proposal and that sort of thing, or even storytelling in photography as well. The way I approach photos, for
Mm.
example, I lean towards a documentary style. It's not always the posed picture that is sort of like a forced narrative, but it's the in between pictures that sort of tell the story of the day or the story of the moment that are more interesting to me.
So, just going back to, splitting your time between a day job and, your side hustle and passion, how do you find the time to balance some of that? And what have been some of the struggles that you've had to face to juggle the two? Because I'm sure there've been times where it's been really busy at work, and then you start getting an influx of maybe
Yeah.
requests for some photography.
Look, I think one of the things that I've had to learn to do is to just say no.
So
So
important.
sometimes, um, you know, there are a lot of gigs that will come my way, and I'll be like, well, that's during the week, during the day, and I've got client meetings and I've got deliverables, and I'm never going to be able to get to it. Or I do take on a gig, and then
Mm.
from a photography point of view, and then after that, I have to invest time to do the editing and the sort of post production work, and that in itself is consuming. And then there's the pressure of the client who wants their photos like yesterday, and they want to be like Picasso level
Yeah.
quality and that sort of thing. So that's hectic, and I had to learn to say no.
So how did you learn to say no? When did that
Look,
moment come for
it
you?
came a while back when I had done a gig. I had gone and taken some photos at an event, and I'd been paid for it, and I'd promised to deliver within, a specific amount of time. And maybe I was a little bit naive at the time because I didn't afford myself enough of a buffer to go and do the post production work properly. And suddenly the deadline was looming. The deadline passed, and I was in trouble. And people were threatening not to pay the rest of my monies and threatening to go and sort of like tarnish my
Yeah.
reputation out there and that sort of thing. And yeah, and like I then
Sure.
spent like a couple of all nighters trying to get the job done, which eventually it was, and luckily they afforded me like a little bit of extra
Mm.
time to finish properly, but it was a painful experience, and I didn't want to go through it again. And in the grand scheme of things, it just didn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
why should something that I enjoy and love, which is photography, turn into something that is like so laborious and painful? So took a step back, did
Mm.
some
Mm.
research, some benchmarking, saw what other people were doing, and learned more about contracting
Yeah.
in the freelance space, and how to protect yourself, and how to sort of like manage the expectations of clients. And I should have known better because a lot of these things exist in my in my day job anyway. It's just that, like, sometimes the things that are so obvious, you neglect to apply them into other areas of your life as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the next question I was going to ask, what was a business blunder turned to blessing? But I feel like that was definitely a blunder turned to blessing for you as well.
Yeah.
You know, learning to say no, kind of don't overlook the basics. I have to ask this as well. I'm sure you've seen that I think it was a couple of months ago, it went around on social media where a photographer was messaged by a woman who wanted a refund on her wedding photos because now she got a divorce. You haven't had that happen to you
No.
at any point in time, have
Luckily
you?
not. That's hilarious. I didn't. I'm gonna Google it.
It was going viral. It was hilarious. It was this guy got a message and it's like, "Hi, you took my photo, my wedding pictures like 4 years ago, whatever. I would actually like a
Wow.
refund because now we're divorced." And it became this whole debate. And
Wow.
he's like, "Are you
Wow.
joking?"
No, I mean, look, like I said, like, I think contracts are so important, right? I think a lot of people sort of overlook contracts because it's like,
Mm,
oh, it's just a small job. But at the very least, have like some sort of service level agreement or something that protects you, an NDA, whatever it is, something that like
yeah.
defines what the exchange is in terms of the value that you're delivering and what you're getting back in exchange. This is so very important to protect yourself, and also for the clients to protect themselves as well, because people can take advantage. People can get very creative about how
Yeah.
they manipulate and that sort of thing, and it's not cool. So take the time, draw up something. You won't regret it. That's a little piece of advice. Yeah.
So, speaking of advice, what would be a top tip of yours for someone who's looking to maybe start a side hustle, pursue a little bit of a passion project? What would you recommend that they do
Yeah. I mean,
or
you
go
know
about
what?
it? I
Yeah.
mean,
I think there's a lot of people who kind of like have ideas, and there's obviously like a formal term for this, and it's escaping my head at the moment. Um, it's when you doubt yourself, and you think maybe my idea isn't that
mm,
big enough, or maybe it is not commercially viable, or whatever it is. And I think people have to be braver, and people have to be more confident in their own capabilities and abilities, and try, because like you never know until you've tried, right? So that's
Mm.
half of the battle and probably the bigger battle. But I also think that a very important thing is for people to take themselves seriously when they do decide to get into something. Like,
Mm.
I like the fact that you've invested in your craft. You've got your recording gear. You probably subscribed to the software that you can use to do the recordings, and you've got your post production stuff that you use and that sort of thing. Like, a lot of people will kind of like half get into it and half sort of like, like, people don't fully commit. And then it's easy to just sort of like, yeah, it was just something I
Mm.
tried out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was just, and you can never really know what the full potential of it could have been, right? So I guess that's my thing, is like,
Mm.
firstly, be brave enough to jump in and actually give it a try. But once you've made that decision and you've crossed that
Yeah.
line, then, like, throw every ounce of your effort and your mind and everything into it, and give it the best chance of succeeding and becoming something worthwhile to yourself and to other people, as well. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, why they're scared to start on the side hustles or take time to invest, is that notion, the fear of failure. If you don't try, you can't fail. So, on that, what is your view on failure? Because obviously, you've gone after quite a big career, you have quite a successful career, and having a side hustle. So, what is your take on failure? I'm sure you've encountered it,
Um,
on your
yeah,
journey.
failure is just like, it's a fact of life, right? It's gonna happen, somewhere, somehow. There's no way that you can completely avoid it. For all of your best efforts, there's always going to be something
Mm.
that, oh, geez, why did that happen? Why did it happen like that? Or could have, I should have, or whatever, right? So I think it is probably the hardest thing to embrace it, but I think that, if you can
Mm.
change your mindset around failure to, one of, I fail and then I'm hurt and then, like, that's the end of everything, to one of, I fail and then I learn and then I can optimize, I can improve, I can do better the next time round or go bigger the next time round. I think that shift in thinking can help a lot of people to go forward, and try things, and commit to some
Mm.
of the ideas and innovations or whatever it is that they may be sort of like sleeping on. Yeah, and that's it for me. I think it's just a mindset shift, and nobody can do it for you. It's one of those things you kind of
Yeah.
have to think about. You have to internalize. You have to make it make sense for yourself, and that sort of thing. Now, it obviously also doesn't mean that you must go out there and just be reckless. Um, there's value in
Yeah.
calculating your risk and trying to mitigate your risk,
Yeah.
right? Um, there are soft entries that you can have into a new space, um, still being committed, but not also putting yourself in a spot where you if the failure does happen, then you are completely ground zero and you've got no way of sort of bouncing back or carrying on. So it's a balancing act, as
Yeah.
well. But failure is a part of life, and it's about how you manage it. It's about how you embrace it. It's about how you think about it, and how you react to it, after the fact as well.
Yeah. Well, that's what the whole idea of this podcast is about normalizing failure. Hopefully, I know no one can change someone's mind about failure, but hopefully we can help guide them in the
Absolutely.
right direction.
No, I was just gonna say absolutely.
Sorry?
You know what? The other thing as well is that, just last thought is, people shouldn't also be afraid to speak to other people. You'll be so surprised, at discovering how many people have thought the
Mm.
same thing or similar thing or walked a similar path and tried something, failed, got up again, and went again. Even those people that you look at and probably aspire to be similar to or emulate their success and that sort of thing have probably failed a couple of times along their journey and probably experience more failures in the future
Oh,
as well.
yeah.
But I think also sometimes hearing about other people's failures and their stories of bounce back can help you to sort of like motivate yourself to say, well, okay, cool, that's okay. It's fine. I can do that too. I can fail too, but I can also bounce back.
So just to close off this before we move on to the quick fire
Okay.
round, I want to end it off on a little light-hearted note. So what was a cinematic worthy cock-up moment for you?
Cinematic worthy. Ooh, I don't
Comical
know.
cock-up
I,
moment.
I think I think you're putting me on the spot here. Cock up moment. I don't think I've had like, like a really epic one. I'll tell you what. I've worked on the Coca-Cola account for a number of years. And I guess sometimes you just sort of get comfortable. And I always shop at Woolies, for example, and there
Mm.
was one morning, and I had a really early meeting. I went into Woolies, and I got myself like a sandwich and a bottle of water. Now, I neglected to think about the meeting that I was going to, which was to go and meet the Valpre client at Coca Cola. And I walked in with my Woolies water, and I put it down on the desk. And yeah, no, I was getting no,
They
they
probably
weren't
just
looking at
looked
it, they
at
were
it.
looking at me. It was all the bombastic side eyes, like, how dare you, but without saying anything. Um yeah, and then I had like my
Yeah.
perfect drinking shot, glug, 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 and yeah, and then slowly but surely it clicked, and I was like, oh my God. And I tried to put it under the table, but it was like far too late by that time.
And hide
So
it.
I guess that's one. That's one for the books. Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So now moving to the quick fire round, just the first word or sentence, just first thing that pops into your head. So starting one, if you could change people's perception about one thing in the world, what would it
Africa.
be? Okay. Two, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
You said one word.
Oh, well, yeah. So one word, one sentence, just the first thing. So worst piece of advice, sorry. First thing that pops to mind. Let me change it to that rather.
Um, hmm. I think I think any number of sentences that start with don't, or you can't, or you shouldn't, or that's not for you. Anything that sort of like puts you in a bucket of that's something for them, and then that's something for you. I think those kind of things are very sort of, I don't know, they trip people up, right? Once you have a perception that
Yeah.
something only belongs to a certain group of people, or realm, or quality of people, or people who live in a certain area, or whatever it is. um, that can be like a major hindrance. I've got a guy who I went to school with who recently had an animated production released on Disney Plus, right? And for me, like, that was like one of the proudest
Oh,
moments,
cool.
even though it wasn't my thing, but it was just like, that's so cool, because you see everybody else's
Yeah.
things flourishing. But moments like that help you believe that, like, no matter where you're from, or what your upbringing is, or what maybe
Mm.
disadvantages you previously had, anything is really possible, based on how you plan, chart your path, and be intentional about trying to get to your dream.
And in contrast to the second question, third question is what's the best piece of
The
advice you've
best
ever
piece of
received?
advice I've ever received is around placing yourself in uncomfortable situations, right? Growth will come from uncomfortable situations. As long as you stay in your comfort zone, as long as you stay in your lane, um, growth is going to be minimal, right? Every sort of like step
Mm.
forward in my career, or in my growth as a person, has always sort of like been all the more significant when I've stepped into a space that's uncomfortable. My current new role is a case in
Mm.
point. I've been a strategist for a long time, but moving into a place where I'm responsible for product innovation, product development, under the umbrella of digital and
Mm.
creative sort of like transformation, is not necessarily something people may have necessarily associated me with, or something I would have sort of said I'd ever be doing. But I've been asking myself, the question, how am I going to grow further in the next year, 2, 3? And this, when I looked at it, was an uncomfortable situation standing in front of me. And I say, this is going to help me to grow. It's comfortable. I'm going to have to learn through it, but it's all good.
Yeah. Product is a very exciting space, and I recruit for that space. So I wish you all the best on that. 4, if you could live in any book, which would it be? But if you don't read fiction, what would
I
be a
would,
book that you
I
highly
would want to live
recommend?
in a children's book. I don't know, something like Winnie
Which
the
one?
Pooh. I want to like spend days chowing honey, uh, running around and swinging from trees with Tigger and stuff. Everybody wants to sort of like hang on to their childhood, like the whole forever young concept. I don't want to be
Yeah.
in a grown-up book. I don't want to be in a horror
Yeah.
story. I don't want to be in a thriller or anything. I want to be in a children's book because it's like fun, carefree, and yeah.
Yeah. And final question. Who are 3 people in the world that you would have over for dinner? They can be fictional, they can be historical, or they can be present.
Whew. Yeah. So many people. So many people. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think maybe more so than the individual people themselves. Um, Maybe the category of person, you know. Um, Being from a creative advertising marketing world, I would want to have somebody who has, been at the pinnacle of my space, right? Um, I don't know, the person who founded the first billion-dollar company, maybe one of these Bill Gates
Mm.
or one of these sort of guys who has founded a tech startup or one of these social media startups that has grown to become like a global entity, you know. Um, Jeff Bezos, Amazon. Like I want somebody who's like created
Yeah.
something so small and probably arguably intangible to start off with, but has grown to be like something that has such massive impact on everything. So that'll be a starting point. Um, I think I'd want a politician because I don't know, like I don't know how many politicians but like I don't know many, like personally.
No, I
So
don't know
like
any personally. No.
I think we always like judge and say a lot and feel a lot about like what we see and hear from politicians, and 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 it'll be great to actually just have like a
Mm.
normal human conversation about stuff, with maybe a president. So reaching into history as a Zimbabwean, I'd like to sit down with Robert Mugabe and get under the hood
Ooh.
and just understand. Yeah,
And
but
ask
why,
why. Just
what,
why.
how? Like I don't know. There'll be a lot of questions. I'm sure it'll be a lot.
A lot of questions, I'm sure. I definitely think you won't be the only one who would like to have Robert Mugabe around for dinner and just be like, dude,
Yeah.
what the
So
hell? Like, why? Just what were you
um
thinking?
yeah, so and then I think somebody from the world of sports, right? I'm a sports fan through and through. Like I'm the kind of person who can just turn on the TV and oh, there's golf and I'll watch golf. And I'll be like, oh, there's tennis and I'll watch tennis. Like, obviously I have my favorite sports and I have my favorite sports personalities and that sort of thing, but like I can just get into it. And sports people are just mentally, physically some of the most amazing people um, in the world, and
Mm.
again, I would love to get into the psyche of like a high performance athlete, you know. Maybe it's somebody like an Evan Etzebeth. Let's talk about that moment that you just
Mm. The man who had a great
Yeah.
weekend. He
Yeah,
just had an amazing
I
Springbok
don't know. It
game.
could be like an Usain Bolt to find out about like how does a person
Mm,
like decide
world's
like this
fastest
is it.
man.
I'm gonna be that fast and do everything it takes to be that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I've got so many sports people that I could rattle off that I'd love to sort of like speak to and understand, because I think also the sports world has also got a lot of parallels to uh, the creative world as well. Like sports people are
Mm,
artists as well. Like in my mind, um, so yeah, I think that would
yeah.
make up my three. Yeah, yeah,
Not really
a
names, it's more
business
kind of
founder,
personalities.
a politician, and a high performance athlete walk into Brian's dining room. There's a joke in there somewhere.
That sounds like a really great
Yeah,
show. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate your time and I've had a really great conversation. And I
yeah,
will be in touch with,
100%.
we'll definitely be
It's
in
been
touch in the
fun.
future.
Great way to spend a Friday afternoon, and yeah, I look forward to more chats.